Welcome to the Heart of Money podcast, where we discuss the impact that money has on every area of your life and where you can learn to make smarter money decisions. Join our conversation as we discuss our past experiences, talk about how to make better money management choices, and in the end, make a commitment to being weird. Hey folks, welcome back to the Heart of Money, episode 53. And guess what that means? We are in season 2, Bob. I am so excited for the fact that we have made it to this point. Folks, if you're just joining us, I am your I'm not your host, I'm the regular host.
I see you've been demoted in this second season. It's about time that happened.
I am your host, Austin Black. Bob is the co-host, Bob Wessler. And I would have normally cut that, but heck, we have so much fun with this. I'm just going to leave it in and roll with it. This is a good time. So season 2, we're here with your host, your co-host, a brand new set of stories, a brand new set of conversations, more guests to come. It's going to be great. Bob, I'm pumped. What do you think about season 2?
I can tell you're pumped by the sound waves you're spitting out right there. That's just, that's Ric Flair-esque right there. So I'm glad you're still Austin Black. I was a little concerned as you started to trail off there that you realized you were actually the host, not the co-host, and was wondering what name you were going to give yourself after all of that. So, yeah, glad we made it to season 2. Can't believe we made it to season 2. I'm excited. You can see my sound waves are starting to get a little happy pappy there. So
Yeah.
they never meet yours. Yours are just off the charts. So,
well, I am 5/8 of an inch away from my mic most times. It's hard to see on the video is kind of because we're going to be at this point. Obviously, we're airing on YouTube. We are having it in the Facebook group. So we got the video going this whole time on us. So if you're watching the video, you can't really see from the angle, but my mic is right here. So I am pretty much eating the mic as I do these shows. Bob doesn't like the taste of his apprentice because he has way off to the side, just kind of sticking off the corner of his mouth. I don't know.
My years as a DJ, I didn't spend a whole lot of time speaking into the microphone. And if it can pick up some blips that I'm talking, that way it doesn't sound like I'm yelling. And if I get too close, they look like a truck. So then I start sounding like Charlie Brown's teacher instead of enunciating clearly. So it's a good thing we have this pop protector here, so I don't sound like that was the best insight you'll get all week, and you have no idea what I just said. So,
well, at least both of our mics worked this time, because in the past, when your mic hasn't worked, I've made jokes about you and you can't hear it, and it really is not as much fun.
Yeah, that's okay. I just play the jokes in my head that you can't hear me say either. So it's hilarious.
So it all works out. It all works out.
Yeah.
Well, folks, if this is the first time that you have tuned in to the Heart of Money, welcome. We are glad to have you. Sit down, buckle up, because we're going to have a fun ride of honest, open, transparent conversations that no one else talks about, and that Bob and I sometimes don't like to talk about, but we're here because you need to hear about it. So that's our mission. That is our goal. That is our job on this show. And we are going to continue with that this week as we talk about something that, Bob, you and I are probably going to have a little bit of controversy on this, which is great. I think that really adds to this show. And I mentioned this about a month ago in a previous episode, that our main goal and intention with this show is to talk about things that are hard to talk about, to just be, like I said, honest, open, transparent, talk about the heart of money, its impact, its role, its our responsibility in managing it, how it affects our life in every area. So these are our in-depth conversations that we really try to get to the philosophy, the psychological, the emotional, the personal elements of money in our life. And that's no different this week. We're going to get into a topic that by the time this airs, it's going to be probably about 5 or 6 weeks since this really came to my mind. But I was on a road trip over this last weekend, listening to some other podcasts from some friends of mine, and this kind of came to the surface. And honestly, it made me take a step back with concern because of my beliefs, my money management philosophies, what I teach even. And I know that there are acceptable ways to do this, and that's why I really look forward to having Bob your insight on this. But I have some strong concerns about how this could be done and how it could go wrong. And everyone's probably going, well, what the heck are we going to talk about today?
I'm wondering what you're talking about. I'm lost. Can you bring
um,
us back?
yes. So it is not uncommon for people to use a credit card today. I'm probably one of the few people in the grand scheme of things that does not use a credit card, has not used a credit card for years now. I think, gosh, probably 2015 or 16 was the last time I had an open credit card. And so that's been 6, 7 years ago now, which is foreign to a lot of people. But I don't use them in any regard. But a lot of people use them. And the concept that came up that caught me kind of that made me wake up was teaching your kid to use a credit card to build credit, to get the rewards, to get the points, to use it judiciously, to use it in a way that would be rewarding to the user. But what made me step back and kind of question this practice was, do kids understand credit versus cash, money management, spending, saving, all these key components and key elements? And if we're trying to raise our kids to avoid debt, which I hope everyone listening to this podcast has that mentality. If not, we're going to try to convince you that that's the right mentality. But trying to avoid debt, trying to manage on a cash basis, trying to live within our means, as a result, grow wealth. Trying to do all that, is credit card utilization, does that take away from that message and from that teaching? And does that present potential problems to our kids later on in life if they have conflicting beliefs and understandings around managing your money, living with cash versus using credit? And that's a big open swath. I know there's a lot of pieces in there. There's a lot of sentiments and emotions and feelings and ideas in there. Bob, I know you probably have a slightly different perspective because you do use credit cards. So I want to open up this floor, but that's kind of the precursor of what we're going to talk about, because of my concerns, because of your experience. Um, I want us just to kind of talk through the potentials, the realities, the issues, the advantages. How could this be a problem for parents? And if they still think it's a good idea, how can they make it work for their kids? So let's have a conversation and talk about this, Bob. I've kind of spilled my initial thought process behind this, um, but just share a little bit, I guess, your own thought process around this, or your own use, or what you've done. Just I'll kind of open the floor to you to have your time on this for a minute.
Well, I'm going to throw it right back to you and ask, after you take a sip of that cocktail
H2O.
juice, H2O with a bit of lemon. What do you use to transact?
What do I use to transact?
Yeah, what do you use for purchases?
95% of the time, it's my debit card.
Okay. Because I'm thinking that, we've got cash, we've got mobile wallets. They're all different kinds of things you can use. And when you say you don't use a credit card, I'm thinking, oh, you use cash for everything. Well, that's true. You're using cash, but you're using a piece of plastic with cash tied to that.
Right.
I'm doing the same thing. When I started out, I got a checking account when I was 16. I got checks. My first purchase was a CD. I think it was a money or not a money order, but I bought it through the mail. A CD that I couldn't get at Walmart or whatever. By the way, it led into a career in DJing for about 7 years that I had music from all kinds of different avenues. So, um, I think I started off with a checking account where I was taught how to write a check, how to keep a check ledger, how to use a T chart, in essence, of money in, money out, keep a flow. Um, which when I got a credit card years later, I used a spreadsheet, which is what I had moved my checking account over from, and I maintain that to this day. Of every purchase I make is on plastic, it's on credit card. I don't use a debit card at all at this point. um, but I make sure that I write down every purchase that I make, and then I pay everything off on a monthly basis. So it's not that much different from what you do. It's just a different type of plastic.
Yeah. So the big thing that kind of triggered my reaction to this is, at what point do kids understand financial management enough? And I know it's going to be different for every single family, so I'm not looking for a specific age, but I'm talking more generally speaking. At what age does a kid have a good enough understanding of financial management that they can distinguish between using a credit card, like you use a credit card, like I use a debit card, from that cash purchase standpoint, and separate that from using a credit card because that's what everyone else has, and we can get these rewards, and that's just the way that people spend money.
Hmm. Um, well, for females, I would guess it's somewhere between 25 and 35. And for males, I would guess it's somewhere between 35 and 55 years of age. Um, Not kidding.
I know you're. That's why I'm
Anyway,
laughing.
yeah. And I think the conversation that we had prior to this podcast was, how do we talk about this? What we had different perspectives on it. And it really comes down to, you got to walk before you run.
Hmm.
Um, the analogy that I came up with was, I wanted a digital watch when I was a kid because those were cool. Now if you even wear a watch, but in order for me to get a digital watch, I had to be able to read an analog clock. So I had to know the minutes and seconds before I could look at numbers and tell what time it was. That was just
Hmm.
my parents preparing me, learning how to know the fundamentals of what time it was if I didn't have a digital clock, I guess. Um, Transferring that over to money, if you don't have the tangibility of what a dollar is, and this is a big thing with Ramsey, is that he's all cash because that has value and you are giving cash for a tangible item, and there's pain that goes with that. That, do I really want to give up these hard-earned dollars for the item that I'm receiving in trade?
Hmm.
When you pull out the cash and the transaction to where it's just a number going back and forth, it removes that attachment to what you have earned, in essence. Um, as I said, we're to the point of mobile wallets and the like. Kids growing up now versus kids in the previous two generations, they are less and less likely to actually use cash, to where it is just a number and they're
Hmm.
transacting numbers versus actually transacting value. Um, I think that if you don't have that friction there to understand one for one, the easier it is to get something straight off your phone. Amazon at one time had the little buttons that you could put on your washing machine to get detergent, or you ran out of something and you just pressed a button without thinking
Yep.
of it. The kid that ran up thousands of dollars on his parents' account because he just kept pressing the button over and over and over and over again. or in the case of my son, who ordered Sesame Street without any of us knowing at the age of 2, except for the fact that I got a notification. I go, honey, did you buy Sesame Street volume 14 or season 14, whatever it was? Nope. Time to lock the tablet. So, um, just the lack of friction, the easier it is to make a purchase without actually thinking about it, the more it escapes us that we're giving something for something.
Yeah. I think that's very well said, and I think back to you asked earlier, my transacting. I still carry cash in my wallet. I still use cash to buy stuff, but I honestly I don't like using cash, and that's why I use my debit card. I like using cash for large purchases, for leveraging, for negotiating, or obviously if I can't use a card, I'm gonna use cash. But I I have personal struggle with managing cash only transactions. I just for some reason I don't always seem to get 100% of my cash transactions recorded. Even if I get a receipt for stuff, there just doesn't always work. Debit card, I can go back and I can look on my account. I see exactly what I'm doing. So I
Mhm.
rely upon my debit card, my banking statement, my online transaction emails, all of that to keep me on tabs of where every single penny and dollar went. But I hear a lot of people, and I know that you're in this camp, and I don't want to say this a negative way to you, but I hear a lot of people saying we use a credit card, we pay it off every month. Whenever I hear that, I hear an excuse, and that's going to sound harsh to some people, but I hear an excuse because I know what the sentiment of a credit card can be in the industry. I know how absolutely phenomenal of a job the credit card companies market their cards and add on the perks to make anyone want to do it. So I know how that works to make you utilize that payment style. And whenever I hear someone say, I use a credit card, but I paid off every month. To me, that sounds like I know I shouldn't be using this card, but I do it because of the opportunity and I still pay it off. And I know people's going to disagree with that sentiment, and you probably even don't fully agree with that. But that's what goes through my mind when I hear that phrase. But at the same time, I know that if you are going to use a credit card and you do feel like that's an appropriate way, that is the only way to do it, right? You do not want to leave a balance on them. That is the only way to use them judiciously and wisely and responsibly is to have that paid off every month. So that's kind of a personal um, pressure point that I have with that whole environment. But with that, do you see any issue with relying upon a credit card as payment and teaching your kids that for the sole purpose of building their credit, getting the rewards, getting the points, using it for that purpose?
Mhm.
Does that raise any flags for you? Because it does for me.
Um, I don't use a card because it builds my credit. I don't need it for that. We've had previous conversations where that was my goal, that when I was first in banking, that you got to get that credit score, because that credit score builds up, because then that helps you with a mortgage. Um it helps you become financially successful. That
Mhm.
was the idea that my parents had passed on, that had been passed on to them. But you know I had to get a loan and pay back the loan and pay interest on the loan to establish credit, which is what you will hear Dave say in many cases, that people are paying to get their credit score. Well,
Yeah.
that's in essence what I did to start. My brother was in a different camp where, showing up on college campus, they were ready to shower him with every kind of American success and discover debt and whatever else. But I couldn't get a card. Maybe because I just learned how to manage money differently. I don't know what my issue was, other than I had to take out a loan and establish credit that way. Um, but we've talked about before. I refuse, absolutely refuse, to pay 1 cent in interest on any transaction. Um, to me, you end up if you carry a balance, you end up paying more for every item you purchase. And we're all about deals. We talk about we want to get a good deal on this, we want to get a good deal
Right.
on that. Maybe we gloat a little bit on some deal we got, but if you're carrying a balance on a card, and you purchase that item on the card, well, you've lost that deal. And the longer you carry that balance, the more that you're going to pay and the worse of a deal you're going to get. And especially now in our current economy, cards are an adjustable rate. So, somebody that had 14% interest before could be up to 34% interest. I mean, I don't know. I don't even look at what the interest rate is because I don't pay it.
Right.
Um, and we talk about deals. I don't use points. I get cash back. Is it a significant amount of cash? Absolutely not. Um, but it just is that icing on the cake of you're taking that much more off of the purchases and you're using the card. That would be the only reason to use it. It used to be that I had a debit card that I got an extra bit of savings or an extra bit of interest on the balance in my account, but things have
Mhm.
changed in the card fee and entering your PIN versus just swiping the card. Those exchanges have changed to where almost anybody now requires you to put in the PIN, or they identify it as a pinless transaction that you don't get that benefit anymore. Um, so I don't get that interest on my account. So I don't use my debit card.
Okay, so walk me through that because I use a debit card as a credit card. I could probably
Mhm.
count on both hands the number of times I've actually entered my PIN in. So I do that pinless swipe like you just talked about.
Yep.
But I've never heard of what you're talking about in this interest being waived or ever. Walk me through that situation.
Well, I have a checking account that, based on the number of swipes in a month, that you don't enter your PIN number, that you treat your debit card like a credit card, that doesn't cost the bank a transaction fee. If you're paying attention to your transactions on your ledger in your
Mhm.
account, if they say PIN not entered or debit card transaction, I don't know specifically, it's probably different by bank. Um, but depending on how the transaction was run with the company, they don't count. So used to be that gas stations did it, grocery stores, different places. You could run your card without getting that, without entering your PIN, and they'd run it as credit.
Mhm.
More and more, to save on the transaction fees, they just call it a pinless debit card transaction. So for me, on my account, I lost the benefit of that extra interest because I'd have to use my card more in different places. It became a hassle for me to find places to use the card where I would still get to earn that extra interest on my account. And that's interest on my balance. Whereas using my
Mhm.
credit card, I get interest on the amount that I spend. So I'm
Yeah.
spending that money anyway at the gas station, to the grocery store, whatever, but I'm getting less interest off the money that I'm spending than I would off the money that's sitting in my account, but I'm spending less by not using the debit card.
That's very interesting. I hadn't realized that. I'm be kind of curious now if my bank did that because we have, interest bearing checking accounts, nothing grand and glorious. But listen, I hardly ever enter my PIN number. Um, so I need to check into that and see if there's something maybe on my banking too that it's not going to change the way I do business, but just curiosity of if that alters the perks and benefits and everything that you count. But folks, we're going to end our discussion for part one there today as we turn this into a two-part conversation on kids and credit cards. So be sure and come back again next week. Join us for part two of this discussion as we dig into more of the management strategies you can use if you do decide to teach your kids how to use credit cards.